So I'm really excited because today we're going to be checking out filming locations for another one of my favorite CHiPs episodes, Neighborhood Watch. And this is one of my favorites because it involves skateboards. It also features Robbie Rist, who we all know and love as Cousin Oliver from the Brady Bunch. So grab your skate and get ready, because today we're checking out filming locations for CHiPs Season 2, Episode 5, Neighborhood Watch. Let's go see what we can find. This episode begins with Ponch and Jon cruising the streets of this neighborhood in Santa Monica. Are these guys ever on the highway? We see them cruising past all of these houses, talking about how Ponch is trying to use his uniform to purchase Dodger tickets.
You know, uniform and everything, I thought I could just step in and get them.
Right here we see them turning onto 4th Street, and that bus bench is no longer here, but that apartment building is. It's just now blocked by trees and you can't really see it anymore. They're traveling right here down 4th Street, passing by some of these houses, and we find out that Ponch came this way just so he could check out the ladies. As Ponch and Jon approach the intersection of 4th and Margarita, they notice a traffic jam, so they pull over to make the streets of Santa Monica safe again. They would have been riding along right here, and then they pull over and park their motorcycles right in front of this fire hydrant and lamp post. As Ponch is walking back to his motorcycle, he walks right in front of this palm tree. Brian's riding his skateboard down this alley that's in between Margarita and Alta. He's riding right past this brick wall. Brian comes darting out of the alley on his skateboard, and he forgets to look both ways before he crosses the street. He almost causes an accident and heads down the street this way. He's passing right by this brick wall, which is now covered by a lot of ivy, and it's kind of hard to see now. Hey, wait a minute, that's not the same kid that just came out of the alley. A car goes speeding past Ponch and Jon. They notice the driver's shaving, and oh no, he's headed in the same direction where Brian's riding his skateboard. Ponch and Jon take off after the speeder, but it's too late. The car's headed right for Brian. He hits his brake and swerves and causes Brian to fall into the grass. Right here is where Brian would have fallen down, and as he laid in the grass, he got quite a tongue lashing from the reckless driver.
What are you, crazy? Don't do that in the street!
What's wrong with you, little idiot? What are you, stupid? Don't do that in the street! Ponch runs over to make sure Brian's okay, and he stands right here lecturing him on skateboard safety. But all of these houses in the background have changed, so there's not really anything to match up anymore. Right about then, Brian's ride shows up. Ponch hands him his skateboard and sends him on his way. Too bad Ponch didn't notice that the car that was picking up Brian was being driven by a bunch of kids. Speaking of, looks like my ride's here. Where you been, man? What took so long? We get the title of our episode on the screen as Jon's pulling over the reckless driver, and we're no longer in Santa Monica, but we're now in the San Fernando Valley, and I'm not exactly sure why they filmed this in 2 different areas, but I'm pretty sure they chose this area because the grass medians make it look somewhat similar to that neighborhood in Santa Monica. As Jon pulls up behind the reckless driver, they round the corner onto Fulton Street. The car comes around the corner and it stops right here. Jon writes him a ticket and sends him on his way, which seems like the proper punishment to me, considering he just witnessed him running a small child off the road and then fleeing the scene. And as the car speeds away from the curb, we see this address. Ponch and Jon are about to get back on their motorcycles when Brian and his friends come racing around the corner. They jump on their motorcycles and they chase after the car going this way down Fulton. They're now at Magnolia and Fulton. They come into the middle of the intersection and the car flips around and ends up pulling into the driveway of that house. And it's got a driveway that goes right through the front yard. So they go in one side and come out the other. So they would have come through the light right there and the car would have flipped around right here in the middle. And then they would have entered into the driveway on this side. And they would have come straight through this driveway and then come out on the other side. But the house is across the street, or well, you can see a new house is being built. So obviously the view is different. After a quick chase, he tells them to turn the ignition off and the car pulls over right here. And the mechanic is still there, although it does look a bit different. But the other building that they stop in front of, that's no longer here. I believe it was probably torn down when they built this busway. Ponch gets off his motorcycle and approaches the car. And as he does, we get a clear shot of this house. And then a clear shot of the DWP building, which I don't know if this is still a functioning DWP, but luckily it hasn't been torn down and still looks pretty much just like it did in our episode. And it was right here in this intersection where Ponch tells it like it is to those punk kids.
Well, I've hit the waves occasionally, and I ripped up a lot of pavements on my skateboard.
When Ponch and Jon are on their way to the call about the car being set on fire, they're traveling down the street right here, moving past this set of apartment buildings, which still look exactly the same. And then it's kind of hard to see because they move past it so fast, but they then go right past this old radio station, which I remember driving past my entire life while living here in the valley. They then head down the street this way. Notice that apartment building and that air raid siren on the corner. So I tried and I tried to find the location where the guy's setting the car on fire. I studied that scene for hours. We drove aimlessly around all the locations where they filmed for this episode, and I hate to say it, but I just wasn't able to find it. Oh well, sometimes you find them, sometimes you don't. Just after Ponch purchases the car that was set on fire, Jon's walking back to his motorcycle when he's almost hit by the same reckless driver who this time is also drunk. So of course, Jon takes off after him. We see the reckless driver come around the corner right here. A few moments later, we see Jon come around the same corner. He makes a left onto this street and the chase is on. He notices Jon behind him and realizes he's being pulled over, and that took place right here in this intersection. However, it appears that all of the houses around here have been torn down and rebuilt. None of them are the same. The car finally pulls over just past a driveway and lamppost, and that would have happened right here. The car would have stopped just past this lamppost, basically where this black SUV is. But again, both of these houses that can be seen in the shot are completely different houses now. One thing that I noticed that's kind of weird is notice this brick wall in their driveway. Even though this is a completely different house, this brick wall is almost exactly the same as the one that we see in the show. Ponch and Jon are on patrol when they notice Brian and his friends causing trouble again. Now, I used to just think these were kids having fun riding their skateboards, but that's until I paid attention to this scene. Notice what she does as they approach the other shopping cart. Yeah, she purposely knocks the bag of groceries to the ground, so no more sympathy for these kids. As you can see in the show, this supermarket used to be an Alpha Beta. It's now Cambridge Farms and it looks a bit different. As a matter of fact, this entire intersection looks a lot different. No more mobile gas station, no more pizza prints, it's all gone. I love what the boy says right here.
Go it! See you later, don't tell my mom. This cuts it for you, Scott.
It cracks me up. Wait a minute, that's not the girl. Okay, never mind, it's her. I mistake. Wait, hey! That's not the little girl. What happened? She's headed right for the street, headed towards these houses, which are pretty much now completely covered up. And for some reason, they keep showing this other shot of the shopping cart going out a completely different driveway with some apartment buildings across the street. It makes no sense. The shopping cart stops in front of these houses. This one still has a basketball hoop above the garage. although not the same one. Ponch and Jon rescue her just in the nick of time and save her from getting hit by this station wagon, and she turns back into a sweet, innocent little girl and not the grocery-hating hooligan that she really is. Ponch deals with the massive traffic jam and then heads over to lecture the kids. Brian and his friends were standing right beside what appears to be a newly planted tree, and that tree's still here, but of course it's got a lot bigger in the last 40 years. And then Ponch and Jon would have been standing right here with this utility pole in the background behind him. Ponch and Jon are back on traffic duty. We see them coming down the street and then pulling their motorcycles over right here. Now the scenery in the background has changed quite a bit. None of these houses would have been here at the time, and actually that street wouldn't have been here at the time either. But notice that sewer access right there. They park just beside that. So Ponch and Jon are parked right here, keeping watch on the neighborhood, when all of a sudden they get a visit from an RC airplane. And who's responsible for that RC airplane? Of course, Brian and his friend. We see them crouched down behind this tree. Notice this brick pillar with the white picket fence. And in one of the shots of the airplane flying around, if you pause it in just the right spot, you can see the street sign for Ethel. In this episode, the only shot that we get of the exterior of the CHP station is an overhead helicopter shot. And look at how much downtown LA has grown in the last 40 years. And for some reason, the one shot that we do get of the CHP station has a really exaggerated zoom. Now keep in mind, this is the station that they used for filming, but the original building was torn down and rebuilt years ago. Brian and his friends are up to no good again, skateboarding down the sidewalk. And this is the stretch of sidewalk that they were rolling down, but it looks a lot different at the time. There was pretty much nothing here, and now all of these buildings have been added. Ponch and Jon make a left turn onto La Cruz Drive, headed towards Alma Real Drive. The skateboarders are continuing down the sidewalk, headed towards this building that says La Cruz, which is still there, but it's now a mathnasium. Ponch and Jon pull up on the corner. The buildings behind them look a lot different. As they pull up to the corner, they see Brian and his friends. Wait, hold on. That's not Brian's friend. That's the man that was in the shopping cart earlier in the episode. Anyways, they continue down the sidewalk. One of Brian's friends loses his balance and falls into the flowers. Ponch and Jon are now no longer parked on the corner, and the flower shop guy completely loses his mind.
You're gonna pay for this. You're gonna pay for all this. Do you hear? What's your name? What's your name?
You have to pay for. You're gonna pay for all these flowers. Oh, you're gonna pay for it. Luckily, Ponch and Jon show up and defuse the situation. Ponch takes the kids on the side of the building to have a talking with them. This building is still there. Ponch has an idea and he calls for the help of Officer Cahill. Her patrol car comes around the corner and parks right here where this black SUV is. And it's crazy that everything here has changed so much, but that awning for the car wash across the street is still there. Officer Cahill is traveling down the street right here, passing by Reseda Park, and she's supposed to be taking the kids to the skate park, but in actuality, she would have just passed it because the skate park is back that way, just a couple of blocks. The patrol car is headed down Reseda Boulevard and then pulls over right here against the curb. Now, this is roughly where her patrol car would have been parked, but it's hard to say exactly because everything here has changed. She would have been sitting here waiting with the kids, and then a few moments later, Jon's truck pulls up and Ponch and Jon hop out, ready to rip up some pavement.
And I ripped up a lot of pavements on my skateboard.
That's because this used to be Reseda Skater Cross, and I'm definitely ready to rip up some pavement, but unfortunately, Skater Cross was torn down sometime in the early to mid 80s, so it's long gone. And although Skater Cross and most everything around it is long gone, you can actually see these two signs when Cahill's pulling up to the skate park. This round sign is very noticeable, and then this one that's mostly covered up by the building now is the one that says pools. Our reckless driver's at it again. This time drinking and driving at the same time. He swerves in the intersection to avoid hitting a car, but ends up coming up onto the grass and hitting a jogger. He skids and stops in front of this house, which is now pretty covered. You can no longer see those windows above the garage. They're hidden behind the tree. He gets out of his car, makes eye contact with the jogger that he almost just killed, and then takes off running. The jogger would have been laying right here, and then the reckless driver takes off that way. Luckily, a few moments later, Ponch and Jon show up and pull over to save the day. They would have been coming down the street this way and then pulled their motorcycles over somewhere right about here. Actually noticed what I believe is a water meter. They would have stopped right beside that because Ponch actually steps on it when he gets off of his motorcycle. As they're comforting the jogger, Jon notices the car and runs over to check it out. From this angle, we get a better view of the house. You can actually see those windows above the garage now. After getting his info from the car registration, Jon decides enough's enough. It's finally time to go kill him, or arrest him, or whatever. We're now back in Pacific Palisades. He's headed right for the corner of Sunset Boulevard and Carey Street. He stands by this bus bench and hails a taxi, which makes a U-turn right by this fire station. There's the bus bench, and there's the same fire station where the taxi flips a U-turn and then stops in the middle of the intersection to pick him up. He gets in the car and they head down Sunset Boulevard, passing by this Kentucky Fried Chicken, but the KFC is no longer here. It's now part of the building on the corner. A few moments later, he pulls up in front of his apartment building. I guess he thinks he got away with it, even though he left his car behind with all of his info, so I don't really think he understands how this works. As he's headed into his apartment, he notices he has a visitor. Jon's motorcycle would have been parked right here in front of the building. A few moments later, Jon walks out the front door of the apartment building, which has been remodeled quite a bit. He takes off running, cutting through the building right next door, which still looks exactly the same, except for they now put a gate blocking the underground parking. He's now running through the alley, and whoa, what is going on with him? Look at that head action and those. Let's see that again. This guy is out of control. He's gonna hurt himself. I mean, look at how red his face is, and his arms are flailing everywhere, and his head. Jon takes off after him, and he goes through this alley to try and cut him off, and that apartment building on the end still looks exactly like it did. He finds him cutting between two houses, but unfortunately those two houses have been replaced by this newer apartment building. He comes out the other side and crosses Santa Monica Boulevard and heads into the park. Like I said, those houses that he cuts through are gone, but this building is still here. And the chase ends right in front of this fence overlooking the ocean. However, that chain link fence is gone, and it's been replaced with a much nicer fence. The reckless driver finally gives up, and Jon shows him a little bit of sympathy. At the end of the episode, Ponch and Jon returned to skate cross.
And I ripped up a lot of pavements on my skateboard.
And I came in this alley behind where skate cross would have been, and I looked everywhere for any remnants of skate cross, but unfortunately I couldn't find anything. However, at the end of the episode, there's a scene where they're rolling down the starting point ramp, and you can see two apartment buildings in the background. And these are those two apartment buildings, and they look pretty much the same. So that means that starting point ramp would have either been right where I'm standing or right here in front of me. And then this would have been the first curve of the snake run. Well, that was a ton of fun. I enjoyed that even more than the first one. I'm a little disappointed about a few locations that I couldn't find, like for instance, the house where the guy's lighting the car on fire, but it is what it is. Make sure you join me for the next episode. Now, you know, I like to surprise all of you. I don't usually tell you what I'm gonna be doing next, but here's a little treat for those of you that watched all the way to the end. In the next episode, I'll be doing Battle of the Bands. So make sure you tune in. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.